Brigid Phillipson, the education sector, on Monday took questions from the House. And then about 2 hours later, she was found to have leaked the news of the tuition fee increase through the press, and she had to go to the House, be rebuked by the Speaker of the House of Commons for the leaks, promise that there would be a leak inquiry, and then go on to deliver a statement which went on and on and on. I'll play you it in a minute. But you'll see that the preamble is all about delivering a good education for students. And then she follows this with the hike in tuition fees, which doesn't actually help universities a great deal, particularly because of the national insurance contribution hike. And it's not going to... So it doesn't help universities, and it certainly doesn't help students. So all this preamble is just rhetorical guff. It's nonsense. Let me play you this thing.
Absolutely not. I just granted the UQ because I knew how important it was, including my good farmers within, surely. Right, before I call the Education Secretary to make a statement, I note the reports about the possible increase in higher education tuition fees started appearing in the media early this afternoon. The Secretary of State is... Mr Holden, you don't help yourself, do you? No. The Secretary of State is here to make a statement, so honourable members will have the opportunity to question. If the premature media reporting is due to an unauthorised leak, then it is great discourtesy to this House. I hope the Secretary of State will be able to identify the guilty party and take appropriate actions and brief me accordingly. So I now hope the Secretary of State is going to announce the leak inquiry and that we will get all the details of how this could have got out, and the House will be informed once that goes forward. Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, can I begin by saying I wish to express my deep regret that the content of the statement that I'm about to give appeared in the media earlier this afternoon. It had always been my intention to come before this House first to make the statement, given the significance and importance of this, because I appreciate that you, members across this House and our conventions, rightly demand and expect that. I hope you can accept my deep frustration and regret at what has taken place, and I will take whatever steps I can to keep you updated on the matter, because I do respect the conventions of this House and my responsibilities to this House, Mr Speaker.
Can I just say, can we take it from now that there will be a full inquiry into how this has happened, that everybody will be brought in, questioned, and you will then update us with a full inquiry? That's what I really want.
Mr Speaker, I can give you that undertaking, and I will speak to officials on the matter as you request.
Thank you. Statement.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to make a statement about the future of our higher education sector and the changes that we will be making for students in the upcoming academic year 25-26. Before I go further, Mr Speaker, I want to make clear the approach this Labour government takes to our universities, and above all to the students whose education is their central purpose. Because the Conservative government didn't just talk universities down, they talked down the aspirations of working class families across our country. They dismissed the ambition of our young people and undermined their opportunities. This government takes a different approach. We are determined to break down the barriers to opportunity, and higher education is central to that mission. Higher education is part of what makes our country great. Enriching our culture, powering our economy, sustaining intellectual traditions stretching back centuries, a beacon of opportunity, not just to students in this country, but from across the world, a sector of which everyone in this House ought to be proud. But when this government took office in July, we found a university sector facing severe financial challenges. With tuition fees frozen for the last 7 years, universities have suffered a significant real terms decline in their income. And we found a regulator, Mr Speaker, subject to political whim, unable to focus on the challenges our universities face. A succession of Conservative ministers who had, for year after year, faced with tough decisions, ducked them time and again. Mr Speaker, we inherited in our universities as across so much of our public sector, the consequences of long years of shameful abdication of responsibility. Long years in which I heard too often from students of the gap between the course they were promised and the experience they had, about the trouble they had making ends meet as they worked hard not merely at their studies, but often at 2 or more jobs on top. Long years in which I saw the amazing research our universities deliver, but how infrequently those triumphs drove wider success. Long years in which I heard from international students who make such an important contribution to our country that the previous government had made them feel neither valued nor welcomed. Mr. Speaker, this is the mess members opposite left behind. But where the Conservatives shirk the hard choices, this government has not hesitated to grip the challenges we face and take the tough decisions to restore stability to higher education, to fix the foundations and to deliver change. We have accepted in full the recommendations of the independent review of the Office for Students. We have brought new leadership to the Office for Students and refocused their work to monitor universities' finances and hold leadership to account. And I thank Sir David Behan for his work, both leading the independent review and now as its interim chair. We have paused the commencement of the last government's freedom of speech legislation while we consider the impacts on universities, students and the regulator. Because whilst universities must be home to robust discussion and rigorous challenge, regulation must also be workable. Mr. Speaker, I am here today to make 2 sets of announcements on higher education reform, addressing the challenges our students and universities face, gripping these issues as a responsible government. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, we will fix the foundations. We will secure the future of higher education so that students can benefit from a world-class education for generations to come. That is why I'm announcing today that, in line with the forecast set out in the budget last week, from April 2025, we will be increasing the maximum cap for tuition fees in line with inflation to £9,535, an increase of £285 per academic year. Now,
I think it's very interesting that she ends up with this sort of kerfuffle about Robbins' report on higher education. She's quite right. The Robbins report on higher education does commend an education that is fit for all and available for all. But I don't see that her budget, her messing around with tuition fees is going to encourage that in any way. If anything, it's going to discourage poorer students from applying or actually taking up the offers that they've been given. I certainly know of one international student already and one student on a gap year who have decided that they are not going to go to university because of the rise in tuition fees and because of the uncertainty about what could be thrown at them next. And I think I understand why they're doing that. University education is like entering a house. You enter through a particular door, whether that door is English literature, not in Canterbury anymore, whether that door is French, classics, or engineering or knitting. When you get into the house, you learn the methodology which you can apply to any subject thereafter. Because the mind is trained to hone in on details and to master large amounts of material at speed and with clarity. Too often we are focused on, or the governments are focused on, subjects which have apparently utilitarian purpose. These were the subjects which were promoted by the polytechnics. And they did a very good job. Today, there are no polytechnics, they're all universities. It's just a matter of nomenclature. But it's an important change. And with that concept of them all being universities, suddenly the powers in government from both sides of the House of Parliament are focusing on these utilitarian subjects, as subjects which are of value, where you learn something. Well, they've got it wrong. They've misunderstood what a university is doing. A university is training the mind.
This increase
If you want to train For a job,
So I want to
go and do
reassure
an
students
apprenticeship.
already at university. When you start repaying your loan, you will not see higher monthly repayments as a result of these changes to fee and maintenance loans. That's because student loans are not like consumer loans. Monthly repayments depend on earnings, not simply the amount borrowed or interest rates. And at the end of any loan term, any outstanding loan balance, including interest built up, will be written off. Increasing the fee cap has not been an easy decision, but I want to be crystal clear that this will not cost graduates more each month as they start to repay their loans. Universities are responsible for managing their own finances and must act to remain sustainable. But members across the House will agree that it is no use keeping tuition fees down for future students if the universities are not there for them to attend, nor if students can't afford to support themselves while they study. So I can also confirm today that we will boost support for students with living costs by increasing maximum maintenance loans in line with inflation, giving them an additional £414 a year in 25-26. And I'm confirming that from the start of the 25-26 academic year, a lower fee limit of £5,760 will be introduced for foundation years in classroom-based subjects such as business, social science and humanities. This government recognises the importance of foundation years for promoting access to higher education, but they can be delivered more efficiently in classroom-based subjects at lower cost to students. Madam Deputy Speaker, the change this government is bringing must go further. So the second set of announcements I make today signal the start of deeper change for our students, for our universities and for our country. Today I want to set out the scale of our ambition to build a higher education system fit not just for the challenges of today, but of tomorrow too. In the months ahead, we will publish our proposals, because in universities, as across our public services, investment can only come with the promise of major reform. The contribution of higher education to our economy, to our communities, to our country must grow and strengthen. That begins with universities doing more to spread opportunity to disadvantaged students, both in expanding access and in improving outcomes. And our most recent data shows why. The gap between disadvantaged students and their peers in progression to university by age 19 is the highest on record. I will not tolerate this shameful divide any longer. Universities can do more and they must do more. And they must rise to the huge challenge of technological change, supporting adults with the flexibility that they need to retrain. Which is why in the budget we confirmed we are pressing ahead with the lifelong learning entitlement. Next, while the UK is home to many world-class universities, it's time that all students in higher education in this country feel the benefit. It's time to raise the bar further on teaching standards, to improve our world-leading reputation and drive out poor practice. It's time to make sure that all students get good value for money, which, if we're honest, hasn't always been the case in the past. But it goes further than that. Universities must do more to raise their impact beyond their gates. They must do more to drive the growth that this country so sorely needs, attracting talent from around the world, joining with Skills England, employers and partners in further education to deliver the skills people and businesses need, and shaping world-class research to create good jobs across the country. Members across the House will know how important universities can be for the areas that surround them too, not just for local economies, but for local communities too. So I want universities to work harder to embed themselves in those local communities. Civic anchors, the beating heart of local life in our towns and cities, not ivory towers far from local concerns. Lying beneath these challenges must be a further transformation, a renewed drive for efficiency. Students and taxpayers support the cost of our universities. They are right to expect that every penny is spent effectively. We will not accept wasteful spending. Universities must rise to the challenge, and that means ensuring that the pay of their top teams is fair and justifiable. I'm determined that our world-class higher education sector does not merely survive in the years ahead, but thrives, supporting students in every corner of our country and at every stage of their lives. I'm determined that our universities become all I know that they can be. The scale of our ambition demands a new approach, one rooted in partnership. So I look forward to partnering with the sector, the Office for Students and UK Research and Innovation. And I will work closely with ministers across government, in particular the Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, to deliver a reformed and strengthened higher education system for our country. As today this government looks to the future, I'm reminded that more than 60 years have passed since the Robbins report on higher education was presented to this House, with its famous principle that courses of higher education should be available for all those who are qualified by ability and attainment to pursue them and who wish to do so. That principle drove the expansion of higher education over the decades that followed under successive governments of both parties. It is central to the thinking of this government today. That's why responsible governments must treat universities not as a political battleground, but as a public good. That's why on this side of the House, we want to see the continued success of our young people. That's why we are determined to ensure the sustainability and success of our higher education sector, not just in the years ahead, but for the decades to come.
The Robbins report that Brigid Phillipson refers to is a report from 1963. And it's fundamentally shaped the landscape of higher education in Britain, advocating for its expansion and democratisation. But 1963, this is a long time ago, and and I think we need a new report to try to rethink the scope and the nature and the rollout of higher education. He talked about the expansion of access. He talked about the 4 objectives, the introduction of skills, the promotion of great general powers of the mind to ensure intellectual growth, and I entirely agree, the advancement of learning to foster academic and research innovation, the transmission of a common culture and the development of society's moral values. He talked about technical college development as well as university. And today what we've got is this sort of mishmash of the two. He talked about funding and governance. He talked about the massification of higher educations. One of the significant outcomes was it laid the groundwork for expanding higher education beyond the elite, advocating for it to be based on the principle that courses should be available for all those who are qualified by ability and attainment to pursue them and who wish to do it. That's a good point. It's increased investment in education. It led to a greater commitment from the UK government to fund higher education, ensuring institutions could handle larger student populations and provide quality instruction. It specifically developed the polytechnics, which have now disappeared. These became the modern universities post-1992, but the idea of the Polytechnic was to broaden types of education available and catering to a variety of vocational and academic aspirations. And maybe the post-1992 absorption of the Polytechnics within the university ranks was a mistake. By promoting a more inclusive approach, the report supported the idea that the more educated populace could lead to economic growth, innovation and social benefits. And the report highlighted not just the economic utility, but also the cultivation of critical thinking, the transmission of culture, reinforcing the view that education served a multifaceted role in society. The Robbins principle that higher education should be available to all who could benefit from it remains a cornerstone of educational policy discussions, reflecting its enduring influence on expanding and restructuring modern higher education. But that principle needs to be reimagined and reapplied. And you can't simply be looking back to the 1960s, to the early 1960s and say, we acknowledge that. We have to do more than just acknowledge it. And the tuition hike, even acknowledging it, is a slap in the face to the Robbins principle. As indeed is the leak of this report before it came out, which is just one of many leaks and announcements to the media before the announcement is made in the House of Commons. It's a rebuke to the House of Commons, and Lindsay Hoyle is quite right and absolutely proper in demanding an investigation and demanding an apology from minister after minister after minister. There were many people in the Conservative Party who flouted this principle, including Boris Johnson, and of course the new leader of the House of Commons, the new leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch. Both of them were rebuked publicly, and Kemi Badenoch was very reluctant to apologise. But the Labour Party, this Labour Party, already has done it again and again and again. And it's tiresome, and it shows a discourtesy to the House. It shows contempt for the basic principles of Parliament. And that is why people think, what's the point of Parliament? It's a diminution of Parliament, which happens because of the flouting of these rules. And the Speaker is absolutely right. And these little ministers need to big up and recognise their responsibility. Their first responsibility is to the Parliament, and then to their constituencies, and then to the advancement of their career, maybe, and to the ministries that they represent. But that's the order.